Hello, everyone. My name is Padmini Nidumolu. I'm the co-founder of Lean and Agile. This is an initiative for women to bring women from across the world together to enable each other, to raise the platform for each other, to connect with each other, to help each other, to lean into each other. And we have a construct called spirals, where a group of women come together. It could be across a geography, or it could be a virtual spiral across the world, but the intent is to bring all of us together to have micro requests, macro requests, whatever it is that we can offer to each other and enable each other to grow stronger and faster. So together we can go farther. There is an African proverb: if you want to go faster, go alone. But if you want to grow faster, you want to grow with a group. So based on that construct, we also launched LIA100, an initiative to bring the stories of 100 women to the world. And these are 100 among many that we know, but these are the women who believe in themselves, who enable other women to grow stronger, and who have offered immense contributions to the community. So as part of that video series, today we have none other than Diana Larsen with us, an amazing individual. And I had the opportunity of meeting Diana recently at a conference. And it's my pleasure and an immense honor for Lean and Agile to bring Diana to LIA100. Welcome, Diana. And
thank you.
I would like to introduce you, besides what I just said, to the audience. And for those who don't know who Diana is, which is uncommon, I would like to say a few words. And I'm actually reading out of a script here because there's so much about her to remember. So she's a visionary pragmatist. And she's a co-founder, chief connector, and a principal coach consultant. She's a mentor at Agile Fluency Project. You have to check that out. It's an amazing project. Diana is an established author. She has co-authored the books Agile Retrospectives, Making Good Teams Great, Liftoff, Start and Sustain Successful Agile Teams, 5 Rules for Accelerated Learning. And she co-originated the Agile Fluency Model and co-authored the eBook, The Agile Fluency Model, A Brief Guide to Success with Agile. For 20 plus years, Diana led the practice area for Agile software development, leading and managing teams and guiding Agile transitions at FutureWorks Consulting. And through the Agile Fluency Project that she co-organized, these are the programs for training, mentoring, and supporting Agile coaches and consultants. And Diana also shares her wisdom. She's gained over decades, over more than 25 years of working with leaders, teams, and organizations. To serve her communities, Diana facilitates productive open space technology events and delivers inspiring conference keynote talks around the world. She's a prolific speaker. She's an international speaker, and here she is. So great to have you, Diana, on this platform. Welcome again.
Yes, thank you, Padmini. Yeah.
So, I want to kind of throw this out there, Diana. And we have met before. I've talked to you before. What comes to my mind when I think about Diana is your immense energy and enthusiasm that you show in your conversations, in your talks, in your interviews. Share with us what inspires you and keeps you going, Diana, at this 1,000 miles an hour pace.
Well, I don't think it's quite 1,000 miles an hour, but one time a number of years ago, someone gave me feedback that being with me was kind of intense. And I was very surprised to get that feedback because I think of myself as a very mellow, laid back kind of person. But since then I've paid more attention and, because I want to be self-aware and authentic. And I realized that those things that I feel strongly about, I am very passionate about, and I can be very intense in my passion for those things. And one of those things through my entire career, my whole adult life, has been the idea that people need to work to make a living. They work to support their families.
Right.
They work for achievement, that good feeling of making things happen, of creating things, of delivering things to others that make their lives better. And in that effort, workplaces should be a good, growthful, healthy place to be for them. And so that's been always my focus has been on helping people be lifelong learners, because that's about growth, and then making their workplaces as environments where folks can be very productive and proud of what they accomplish, and so on. And so I'm always looking for new opportunities to help that idea along and help it get more traction. I'm one of many, many, many people who are on that journey, but that is the journey that has powered my passion over the years. The idea that workplaces need to be a wonderful, healthy place to be, and that they need to be places where people can learn and grow.
Right. And that's very valuable, Diana, what you said,
Yeah.
right? Workplaces should be a place for us to be nurtured, and we can grow and bring our full selves to
Right.
the organization. In fact, a good segue here, which I meant to ask you, was about the book you have authored, right? Agile Retrospectives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot about how organizations, teams, and individuals can pause and reflect on where they are and where they want to be, and what does the path look like to the target state. So, adding to what you just said about the organizations and what they should be, right? The should is the key word here. In the current challenging situations, right? We are in an overwhelming situations, across the world. What do you think the organizations can do in the current pandemic situation to pause
Mm-hmm.
and retrospect?
Right.
What led them to the current situation? Are they prepared for the current situation? Or when the tide goes down, how can they revise their policies, their strategy, and the leadership decisions, based on the learnings they had during this period?
So to start out with your question, I have worked very hard to take the word should out of my vocabulary.
Hmm.
And I try to replace it with could. So there's many things that organizations could do
Right, right.
to put themselves in the position of learning from this experience. And, the 12th principle in the Agile Manifesto, the second page, is at regular intervals, the team pauses to reflect, tune, and adjust so that they can become better, right? And so the idea is it's not learning for the sake of learning, it's continuously learning for the sake of improving, of getting better at what we do, at the way we work together, at the quality of our products, learning all the various dimensions that are there. Well, so the same is true of organizations. Teams are just a fractal of the organizations that they're in. And so the same is true, that self-similarity is there. Groups of people together can learn, reflect, tune, and adjust their work. And in times like these, when things are changing rapidly, for whatever the reason, it becomes even more important to remember that those pauses to say, what can we learn from what just happened? Can that tell us about the future? Because it can only tell us so much.
Right.
Because things are changing so rapidly, new ideas are emerging, new possibilities are emerging. But how can we, based on where we have come from, how can we position ourselves to build and maintain and sustain our resilience, our flexibility to take those new opportunities, our opportunities to care for each other so that we're all prepared to move forward. You know, in the decades ago, there used to be, people used to talk about software projects as death marches, that, you know, they'd work and work and work, and then all of a sudden the deadline would be looming, and now everybody had to be at work all the time, 70, 80, 90-hour weeks through the weekend to finally deliver. And of course, that is not pausing to learn. That is work, 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 right? And it's a little bit like only breathing out.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
and there's a good reason to call that a death march, because if you do that, if you only do that, you die,
Yeah.
right, as a human. And so the idea is that in our very physiology, in all parts of us and in all around us in the world, there are so many examples of the need to, yes, breathe out, move forward, and then take the time to breathe in, because that's what enables us to keep going. It's that back and forth. And so when organizations just keep trying to do things harder, the same way they've been doing them, oh, things are changing, we'll just do the same thing we've been doing even more, that's not a road to resilience. That's actually not the road to success. What is important for success is that ability to take action and then look at what happened and what does it tell us about the next action. So in some of the complexity things we talk about, you know, trying something, then looking at it, seeing what we can learn for that, and letting that help us choose the next thing that we try. And by taking small bites like that, we don't over invest, and so that we, you know, end up creating waste. We invest just the right amount, pause, learn from it, and then choose our next, what one of my mentors, Glenda Oyang, calls the next wise action.
Hmm.
And that's what retrospectives enable us to do. So whether we're talking about, you know, hosting an entire organization open space to take a pause from the regular work and see what the entire system has learned, or whether that's the leadership team pausing to do a retrospective on their own work, or the heads of departments across the organization to take a lateral look at how things are moving along. Whatever part of the system we decide to look at, that opportunity to do some things and then pause and look at them actually makes us go faster, because we don't get the burnout. We don't get the fatigue and the collapse. We don't get those things happening. We don't lose our best people, because if there are better than best, but that's a whole other conversation. But we don't lose the people we would like to retain, because we've made it so uncomfortable to continue to work with us. So many organizations, I think, would benefit by building in some regular retrospection, some regular stopping to reflect and adjust planning. And there are many new streams of ideas in the world that are out there that will help us with that. That's part of what Beyond Budgeting is about.
Right.
That's what Agile certainly has that built in at its core. And there are lots of other things. Lean does the improvement kata, right? In the Toyota production system.
Yeah.
So all of those kinds of things are all part of how we get better at what we do. And lots of other industries know that as well. Firefighters do after action reviews, and the military do similar kinds of things. I mean, there are many instances of where people really understand that pausing for however long, you know, just not over investing in it, but long enough that we can really take a look at what's been happening, understand what that might mean to us, make some choices about us, choose a next wise action, take it, and then keep that cycle going.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the organizations probably will evolve to it right after this pandemic, because I think they will invest in that kind of reflection. And I want to go back to another book of yours here, Diana, which is Five Rules for Accelerated Learning.
Yes.
And I'm sure there was a lot of thought put behind that.
Yes.
And I think that is so applicable in the current situation. We're all thrown into this situation with no heads up, no preparation, or no know-how.
Right.
And we are inspecting, adapting pretty much every minute. We are just, we've thrown ourselves, into situations where let's do this, let's figure out if that works. If it does not, let's pivot. So, interestingly, we are actually having to do micro retrospectives, micro inspects and adapts as we go.
Yeah.
So if you were to author this book in the current times, or if you were to write a sequel to your first book, how would it be? Maybe you should start with just giving us a 2-minute summary of what the book is about and how it would be different today.
Right. Well, it is a continually evolving book, sometimes at a very slow pace, but we published it on LeanPub, and it is still on LeanPub because that meant that we could continually adjust it.
Yeah.
But we haven't touched it for a little while. I'm very proud of that book because I wrote it with my son, Willem Larsen, who also has a lifelong affinity for really understanding how people learn and what that learning can contribute to our lives, our work lives, our private lives, wherever. And so that book is really centered around the 5 rules. And the rules are keep it alive, which has to do with understanding that when we're talking about learning in this context, we are talking about humans. And we know some things about how humans learn. We've observed a lot over the years about how humans learn. And we know the kinds of things that they respond to, color, things that appeal to our senses, lots of those kinds of things. And so we want to take those things into consideration when we are creating a learning environment, whether that's an ongoing learning environment like a workplace, or whether that's a event-based learning environment like a training, or whether it's a interpersonal learning environment like coaching or mentoring. We always need to keep in mind that we're talking to someone who is a human here, and that humans have certain needs. Then the second one is setting first, which it's a little recursive because it has to do with keeping in mind right from the beginning, what is the environment we're trying to create and what are the best things which the other rules feed into. So knowing what those other rules are is helpful here, but making sure that we are creating an environment that is supportive of the learning that we're doing. And that has to do with paying attention to keep it alive and some of the other things. The next one we call Do It for Real. And that is about building fluency. You can tell this also fed into the creation of the fluency model. But it is about that people learn best when they are put in situations where they are as close as possible to doing things for real. Now, when that's not possible, so we want astronauts to learn about going into space, so we can't just throw them into space because they would die with no oxygen or anything, right? But we can put them in their full suits and throw them in a swimming pool where they can experience weightlessness or so on, or pilots and flight simulators. I mean, what we want to do is get as close to using the real tools, the real equipment, the real relationships as possible, because that's where people learn the most. It makes it most relevant to them.
Right.
Then the fourth one is start obvious, stay obvious. And that means be very clear about what it is we're trying to learn, and not play games. And not, I don't mean that, but games in the sense of psychological games with
Right.
that. Make sure that we are clear about what we're trying to learn, that we are not overwhelming people or underwhelming them, boring them. We want to stay kind of in the zone, right? And so it's clear how we're moving forward together. And then the fifth rule is focus on flow. And so ensure that the learning that we are doing is coming to us in bite-sized pieces, which is one of the reasons I love the iterative and incremental approach of Agile, is taking small pieces and learning from those small pieces, incorporating those into how we do, and then going on to the next piece. We oftentimes call them bite-sized pieces,
Right.
something that's easily consumable and that we can integrate before we take the next bite. So those are the 5 rules. Keep it alive, setting first, do it for real, start obvious, stay obvious, and focus on flow. And we find that whether we're talking about individual learning, whether I'm trying to manage my own learning, whether I'm trying to help people in a training or a workshop, whether I'm setting up a workspace for a number of people, those 5 rules are always relevant,
Right.
because they aren't about something specific like education or training. They are about ongoing learning and making sure that that can happen. So that's one of the things I'm very passionate about. I mean, it's why I wrote the Retrospectives book, because I have such a desire to make sure that people can learn the things that they need to make their lives better.
No, that's great. So would you write that book during this time? If yes,
Yeah,
if
I
you
think I would
do,
write
how
that.
would it be different?
Yeah, I don't know. I find it, I'd probably include more. We have included some examples, like little, stories to go with each, to give examples of what it means to be following that rule as
Yeah.
folks are learning. So I'd probably include more examples, and maybe we will go back and do this, more examples about online learning, virtual learning, um, and how you can create the environment for people to learn on platforms like Zoom, and there are a lot of other folks who are doing that as well. So I'd probably include more about that. Um, from my standpoint, the when I sit down here to do, you've made an appointment with me to do a video, I think about what if people are going to be watching this video.
Right.
What is the setting I need to create in order to make that learning as easy as possible for them? Bite-sized pieces, focus on flow. How do I make sure it's be obvious, make sure there aren't too many distractions here, those kinds of things. So wherever I am, I'm constantly going back to that. And I think over time, we've accumulated more examples, and I would definitely include more stories, examples of different kinds of settings that people
Right.
might be in where they are learning.
No, that's fantastic. And yes, I think the learnings will be
Yeah,
based on different platforms and scenarios now. And
right.
I highly recommend that book on Lean
No,
Pub. I
thank
have
you.
read it, and I really hope everybody does.
Oh,
So
thanks.
another segue here, Diana. So Lean and Agile also has a branch, if you will, called Women Inclusion Pledge. We
Mm-hmm.
call it the WIP, not the
Mm-hmm.
Kanban WIP.
Yeah.
But it is all about how can we promote inclusion at all levels,
Mm-hmm.
not just in organizations, but conferences, organizing conferences, and creating that intentional space for women to come and share their stories.
Mm-hmm.
So you have decades of experience, even in speaking and participating, and you've been a chair of Agile Alliance for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience engaging with the community, Diana, what was your experience, or what are your thoughts on? Did you see inclusion being at the core of these conferences or events that you've been to?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I've seen some changes over the years. When in the very early days of the Agile conferences, when we would go to them, there were just a handful of women, and we used to joke that we knew we would be successful when there would be lines for to get into the ladies' rooms. Sorry for that, but um, uh, and now that happens
Yes.
today,
Yeah.
more in Agile conferences than in any other technical conferences, other than sort of Grace Hopper, which is just for women.
Yeah.
But or not just for women, but is mostly about women. Um, the that definitely is true. I think women are more drawn to the collaborative style of working that Agile promotes. And there are more roles. You don't just have to be a hardcore developer, though there are amazing women that are hardcore developers.
Yes.
But there are other roles in the software development process that we're identifying. Um, and so I see a shift. I think we still have an incredible amount of progress to make. We've come a ways. We could come a ways further.
Right.
We are not at yet the place where anyone can hold a conference and not know that they need to include a code of conduct,
Right.
because there are still problems with various kinds of harassment and discrimination, and those in the broader society. And so those show up in any microcosm of the broader society, like a conference that we might create.
Right.
And so, those things are still very alive in our societies and in our communities. So they are still alive at conferences. Though I think in many ways, some of the best conferences have put a lot of energy and effort into minimizing those instances. And I really appreciate that. I think other places that we could make some progress are, a couple of years ago, my former business partner and I, Sharon Buckmaster is her name, um, she and I did a presentation at one of the Agile 2018 or something. It was in San Diego. Um, to about how to be an effective bystander, because
Hmm.
I think we still don't have enough active people being active at looking out for each other
Right.
when those instances of violations of a code of conduct or
Yeah.
those kinds of things happen. So we all need to be better at getting past our discomfort and becoming better bystanders, because it's the behavior of the bystanders more than any other factor that dictates whether or not you will see harassing behavior or discriminating behavior or bias of any kind going on. If the bystanders allow it, then it will happen.
Right.
If the bystanders are clear that it is unacceptable, it may not happen, not at all, but it certainly happens much less. And so I think we still have progress to make in that area. And and women, unfortunately, just like with any marginalized group to some degree or another, we have to keep our eyes on the prize and keep moving
Yeah.
forward. It'd be great if we could get more folks on board with us to help, more men on board with us to help.
Allies. Yeah.
Yes, but that that is across, that works across all of the isms,
Right.
right? I mean, and we aren't, I mean, on one level we aren't alone. I mean, even, it's funny, we think that there is this majority out there, but in fact, if we really look at it, there are more of us that are marginalized than they are of folks who have ultimate privilege. I mean, I have a lot of privilege. I'm a white middle American woman. I get to do a lot of things that people in other marginalized groups don't get access to. I'm very aware of that, and I'm very aware of the responsibility that that brings me to help out where I can. Things like doing bystander training, and
Right.
or and just being one myself, being willing to do that myself. But but we need to support each other in our efforts much more than we do. So I need to be looking out for folks who are victims of racism or anti-Semitism or bias against LGBTQ plus folks, or all immigrants, all of the folks who are marginalized and kept back be, just by virtue of who they are. I can't just look out for myself as a white woman. I've got to be aware that all of us together are very powerful. And really, all of us together are the majority. And it'd be helpful if we could begin to act like that.
Thank you so much for saying it on this interview, Diana. Um, I really appreciate you
Yeah,
spelling that out because we don't get to hear that very often.
right.
So it's indeed a privilege to have you in this community who
Oh,
is
thank you.
actually doing some work in that respect and inspiring us. So thank you. This is a very powerful message for all of us out there.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, and also, Diana, I'm sure in your experience and engagement with the organizations, coaches, and communities, what is the change that you have seen in the, let's say, in the last decade? Good, bad, neutral, doesn't matter. But what is the prominent change that you observed in this space?
Um, well, for one thing, I think people are finding more ways to be vocal.
Yeah,
And that that that's showing up in ways that that I like and ways that make me uncomfortable, but I think on the whole it's a good thing. And I think we have so many more channels
right,
to communicate. It's sad that right now, one of our primary channels for staying in touch with each other and communicating with each other has been cut off. And that is just being together in the
right.
same space at
Face
the
to
same
face.
time.
Yeah.
We're working from home, we're sheltering in
Yeah.
place, and so on. And I don't know how long we as humans will be able to sustain that, because we thrive on connection,
Yeah.
whether we're introverts or extroverts or from whatever culture we're from. It doesn't matter. We all thrive on connection.
Yeah.
Maybe small groups instead of big groups, or just one other person, but we need that. And so that's a huge change that we are working with now. And we're looking for ways
Yeah.
to mitigate the impact of that by being online more, by being in virtual spaces more. But everything has an upside and a downside,
Yes.
right? And so the upside of us staying apart is that we are maybe protecting our health, our physical health. The downside of it is we may be impacting our
Mental.
mental health, our
Yeah.
relationship
Yeah.
health.
Yeah.
And so I really hope that we take care to repair that damage wherever we can find it, and work with that So that's, that's a huge change.
Yeah.
And then also just the fact that we have all these channels that we can communicate on, is making huge changes in the world. Things that we relied on for many, many, many decades, like a daily newspaper, or,
Yeah.
and now is the whole landscape of that kind of
Change.
journalism is
Yes.
shifting.
Yeah.
But new kinds of journalism are coming to the fore
Yeah.
to, to move into the spaces. I was talking to the analogy that comes to mind is I'm talking to someone about doing online training and virtual training, and we were talking about how do we take the things that we did in our face-to-face workshops and transfer them to online. And there have been some ways of that being successful. But then we started talking about, but what are the new opportunities for new ways of learning that these new media are offering us,
Right.
right? So what is it that we can do on, as opposed to, so for instance, if I had a in-person training, we might do breakout groups. Well, we can also do great breakout groups in Zoom and
Right.
some of the other online
Which I
platforms.
love. Yeah. The feature.
Yes, right. And but what can we do in Zoom and the online platforms that we couldn't do face to face that help us? So I use the analogy of carob and chocolate. You
Hmm.
know, if we expect carob to taste like chocolate, we are going to be disappointed. I mean, people often think of it as a substitute for chocolate, but
Right.
you know what? It's not chocolate.
Not. Let's face it.
Um,
Yeah.
but if we taste take carob because we enjoy the taste of carob, because that has value in itself, not because of what else it is might be simulate or be like, that's a whole other thing. And so I think we need to embrace this virtual world as our carob. It may not have been our first choice. We'd really rather have chocolate. We'd really rather have the thing we're
Right.
familiar with. But can we take this new way of being together and find the possibilities in it?
Yeah.
I always think there are new possibilities and new potentials in everything we encounter. And so shifting our minds to doing that. And that may be one of the biggest changes that I have seen, um, is people's more and more willingness to say the new ways can be as good as, or even better in some ways,
Right.
than the ways we've always been doing things. I think in the past there was a lot of effort put into maintaining the status quo, or the traditional, or the people who just could not let go of waterfall in those situations where waterfall was no longer
Sure.
viable,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there are situations where that still is a good way to work. And
Yeah.
when those come up, you should definitely use a phase development method to approach
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
But things are moving so fast that there are lots and lots of places where that's no longer the right method to
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
And so that willingness to embrace the new learning and to manage ourselves in such a way that we don't become overwhelmed.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's
that I
very
think that's a big thing that I've seen, and it's in greater and greater numbers. People are doing that. I mean, there are always those small voices, the weak signals, but that weak signal has gotten stronger and stronger over time.
right. Right. And I think very predictably, this pandemic situation might offer us a quantum leap of
Yes.
change that we can see, right? It
Yeah.
could be a decade worth of learning kind of
Right.
packaged into, just probably within a
Right.
year, because
Right.
we're all having to inspect and adapt so quickly and,
Right.
out of need. Now, this is fantastic
So, well,
conversation.
so from a lean point of view, right? We've been very happy with Kaizen.
Yes.
Now we're in Kaikaku.
There you go.
Right.
Next stage.
Right.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think that is a great, association you mentioned.
Right.
Absolutely. I think we shifted into that next phase,
Yeah.
whether or not we like it. We
Yes.
are in it, and we better embrace it, as you said, right? The carrot and the
Yeah.
chocolate metaphor. No, this is lovely. Thank you so much, Diana. And then before I let you go, what is the message that you want to give to the community? And I always wrap up my interviews with that,
Mhm.
because that really is the fulcrum of of this conversation.
I think staying curious, continuing to look for those opportunities for new learning, and then incorporating that learning into your next steps forward. I think that has to be our most important job right now. And teaching other folks how to do that, or becoming models for other folks for how to do that. Certainly, I feel a lot of affinity with my community of Agile coaches,
Yeah.
and I think that's our primary role right now
Yes.
is setting those conditions for people to um, learn and which includes lots of things, psychological safety and all that.
Yeah.
But that's where we need to go. We've got to keep our eyes open for the new opportunities.
Love that. Stay curious, right?
Yeah.
Because you
Right.
just don't know what tomorrow will bring to us,
Yeah.
especially in these situations. I think that's a
Right.
very relevant and timely advice. So,
Mhm.
with that, Diana, thank you so much for your time. And this was a lovely conversation, and we hope that you will continue to spread and share your wisdom in the years to come, and impact our community the way you are currently. Thank you
Oh,
so
thank
much
you.
for being a part of LIA100.
Mhm.